Algerian nationalist leaders seized by France are manacled at the Algiers airport, to which they were diverted by French security authorities. A plane which was carrying the quintet from Rabat to Tunis, where they were to take part in a conference with Tunisian and Moroccan leaders, was ordered by radio to change its course and to head for Algiers. The pilot, a Frenchman, obeyed, and the leaders, taken completely by surprise, were arrested when they landed here. A trick that sets off a new wave of violence in North Africa. On the border between Israel and Egypt, a troop of Israeli frontier guards patrol a troubled area. The locale being that described in the sensational announcement by the Little Republic that its forces have penetrated deep into Egypt's Sinai Desert in the direction of the Suez Canal. An assault, it is said, that had to be made because of constant Egyptian military attacks on Israeli citizens and the mining of land and sea approaches to the Republic. It's a time of border trouble for Israel, and another incident on the Jordanian frontier results in a roundup of Arab infiltrators. Action that follows an attempt by these illegal entrants into the country to terrorize the Israeli populace living near this troubled line. On a state visit to Tunisia, Sultan Mohammed V of Morocco is escorted by the Bey of Tunis as he makes a triumphal tour of the North African port city. The Moroccan ruler is in Tunis to discuss proposals for a North Africa union and to try and work out a plan with the French for an honorable peace for Algeria, a stand that rates him an enthusiastic reception. Next day, Tunis, with all the Arabian world, is in ferment, a situation caused by the news of the arrest of 5 Algerian nationalists who were flying here for talks with the Sultan and the Bey. It's a tense situation which brings soldiers to the streets to keep the peace, but indignant mobs are everywhere. The action of the French in diverting the plane on which the Arab leaders were flying is regarded as piracy, and protest meetings must be broken up to prevent rioting, causing Tunisian Premier Habib Bourguiba to call a conference to calm the populace by announcing France will release the seized men. Its principles again challenged by the events in the Middle East, the United Nations Security Council holds a solemn session in which all parties to the dispute have their say. Movietone bringing you the highlights.
Israel is not out to conquer any new territory, but is determined to wipe out the bases in the Sinai wilderness from which murder and death and destruction are launched against her.
Security Council, noting that the armed forces of Israel have penetrated deeply into Egyptian territory in violation of the armistice agreement between Egypt and Israel, expressing its grave concern at this violation of the armistice agreement. 1. It calls upon Israel immediately to withdraw its armed forces behind the established armistice lines. 2. Calls upon all members, A, to refrain from the use of force or threat of force in the area in any manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. B, to assist the United Nations in ensuring the integrity of the armistice agreements. C, to refrain from giving any military, economic, or financial assistance to Israel as long as it has not complied with this resolution.
In these circumstances, and since a vote today is being insisted on, I shall be obliged to vote against the draft resolution.
The dramatic voting followed as Britain and France vetoed 2 separate United States and Soviet resolutions for an immediate ceasefire. But the body did succeed in calling an emergency session of the General Assembly, and though Britain and France again voted no, the decision was not vetoable. The U.S. in strange company fighting for peace. Now joined by British and French forces, the Israeli army that thrust into Egypt to precipitate a new Middle East crisis makes a brave show at a final inspection by General Moshe Dayan, field commander. A modern striking force, it swept to success in the Sinai Desert, cutting off the Gaza Strip to effect an amphibious landing near the Suez Canal after routing 20,000 Egyptian troops. Diverted from all other concerns by the crisis in the Middle East, President Eisenhower is in a grave mood as he addresses the nation from Washington on the critical situation.
On Sunday, the Israeli government ordered total mobilization. On Monday, their armed forces penetrated deeply into Egypt and to the vicinity of the Suez Canal, nearly 100 miles away. And on Tuesday, the British and French governments delivered a 12-hour ultimatum to Israel and Egypt, now followed up by armed attack against Egypt. The United States was not consulted in any way about any phase of these actions, nor were we informed of them in advance. As it is the manifest right of any of these nations to take such decisions and actions, it is likewise our right, if our judgment so dictates, to dissent. We believe these actions to have been taken in error, for we do not accept the use of force as a wise or proper instrument for the settlement of international disputes. In the circumstances I have described, there will be no United States involvement in these present hostilities. I therefore have no plan to call the Congress in special session. Of course, we shall continue to keep in contact with congressional leaders of both parties. I assure you your government will remain alert to every possibility of this situation and keep in close contact and coordination with the legislative branch of this government. The peace we seek and need means much more than mere absence of war. It means the acceptance of law and the fostering of justice in all the world.
A captured Egyptian standard is displayed for the Movietone News cameraman with Israel's punitive expedition into the Sinai Peninsula, where knocked out Egyptian tanks and silenced enemy batteries marked the advance of the Israeli fighters. Though captured Egyptian wounded are treated with every consideration. Too late for the dead comes the news that Israel has notified the United Nations that it accepts the General Assembly's ceasefire appeal. But an anxious world hears the news with hope, for it can mean peace here too. For this is the disputed Gaza Strip, where a lightning strike by an Israeli force bottled up 20,000 crack Egyptian troops, and a continuance of the hostilities could result in their slaughter. Israel now claims complete control of the Strip, and the latest activities of the Republic's forces are confined to mopping up operations, which may be the last in the whole Middle East crisis. The latest news incidental to the release of these pictures being that Britain has told the UN that it has ordered all bombings to stop forthwith. News flashed immediately to all Israeli, French, and British advance units. With an interest based on the deep patriotism of the Israeli for their reborn homeland, the population of the Republic followed the news from the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip with anxious concern. While in Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities, armed civilian patrols are ready for any emergency. And everywhere throughout the country, girls too young for more active duties work day and night assembling first aid kits for the front. In tow to Haifa, the Egyptian destroyer Ibrahim Awal is an early prize in this latest outbreak of hostilities between Israel and Egypt. Crippled by rocket-firing jet bombers, the destroyer was captured after a 3-hour battle, the first surface ship in history to surrender to aircraft. In London's famed Trafalgar Square, a reverberation of the crisis in the Middle East sees a crowd of countless thousands protesting Sir Anthony Eden's intervention policy in Egypt. Organized by the National Council of Labor, the mass meeting is addressed by labor radical Anarin Bivan, a polemic oration that goads the crowd into demanding the resignation of the Prime Minister. Your movie Phaeton news cameraman went right along with the Anglo-French expedition against Egypt to be at Port Said to film the start of the amphibious attack on the Mediterranean mouth of the Suez. An advance that was followed after bitter fighting in the taking of Said and Port Fouad. Claimed to have as its objective the restoration of order in the Middle East, the action also engages paratroopers, with France contributing one of its crack regiments of camouflage sky fighters, ready for the invasion at 0 hour, which a British transport spearheads carrying a company of airborne islanders. The first objective is an Egyptian army airfield outside Port Said, and there's no hesitation by the Tommies, though they jump into a cackling inferno of ack-ack. The paratroopers soon controlled the canal zone shown below, after which the UN ceasefire plan was accepted by the invaders, but not before the waterway was closed by Egyptian sinkings of blockade ships.